different Calyrex Shadow Rider team, especially with that Glacier. You don't see that very often on team comps like that. And you were just talking about Indie. There it is, being able to support with Follow Me. And yeah, you know, despite Series 8 being a format with restricted Pokemon, we're going to start off this game with no restricted Pokemon on the field. Both players probably vying for some early game disruption and setup.
I mean, that's so valuable too, being able to start the game off just with that disruption, slowly chipping the opponent down and their resources and stuff here. So I really like the decision for these players to be starting off with these Pokemon. I mean, Umbreon 2 is so dangerous if not dealt with the opportunity for, of course, the Snarls that you were talking about, the Yawns. We will see that Follow Me come out from the Indeedee here. And this Rotom's just free to set up a nasty plot, which, I mean, Alejandro definitely going for a fast start. The Snarl, of course, from the Umbreon is going to start bringing that special attack back down, but the Rotom's still sitting pretty at a +1 special attack here.
Yeah, and you know, that was the big question going into this. Does the Rotom have Nasty Plot? It ends up having Nasty Plot, which is actually such a big deal. And look at that, the double up onto Indeedee actually doesn't take it under 50%. So another Snarl and Spirit Break might actually allow it to still survive. So I like the leads from both ends here, right? Rafael wants to put on some early game disruption. Snarl able to decrease that Rotom so it doesn't snowball too quickly. And when you combine Snarl with Spirit Breaks and Light Screens, you know, Rotom will definitely be checked a little bit better as opposed to if you know, don't Snarl in the early game. Rotom, if it just gets the +2 or +4, just looks so strong. So Rafael kind of weathering the early game against this Rotom.
Right, from Alejandro's side, we're seeing a turn very similar to the first turn played here, just opting for another Follow Me and another Nasty Plot here. A Snarl, of course, from this Umbreon. I mean, this Nasty Plot's bringing its special attack up too. The Snarl is only bringing it down 1, so I mean, Rotom's just free to keep Nasty Plot and keep setting up here as this Indeedee. Oh, looks like it's actually going to be taken down. Indeedee. No, wait.
It survives. No, I think it's like looks like 1 HP.
No, my bad. It holds on 1 HP. It's so close. I can't even see the red on the bar there, but the Indeedee holding on just barely to disrupt this board for one more turn here. That was close. I know you said that you were certain this Indeedee would survive, but it definitely looked like it almost went down there. It
was so close. Yeah, I mean, that literally looks like 1 HP. So this next turn is interesting from Alejandro's end, right? Do you actually just commit a Dynamax immediately? Do you want to go for another Nasty Plot? You know, that's a potential. But, like, if you go for another Nasty Plot, you risk something like a Snarl plus a Spirit Break just bringing you down, you know, to where you started the turn off.
So it looks like Light Screen is going to be set up instead here as Rotom goes for yet another Nasty Plot here. Of course, Umbreon going for the Snarl, finally picking up this KO on this Indeedee, and this Rotom is looking a little scary here.
Absolutely. I mean, it is at +3 special attack at this point. Now, Rafael did get that Light Screen up, so, you know, even Max Rotom, I don't think it would just be picking up one-hit KOs, which you would normally expect it to after getting 3 Nasty Plots off, but Rafael at least in a position where you're not going to get completely swept by Rotom. However, I think Alejandro's probably happy with this trade-off. The whole point of Indeedee was basically to allow Rotom to keep the setup. Now that it's fainted, you get a free switch it into whatever you want as well. So my main question here is who do you actually end up Dynamaxing? Landorus is going to come in from Alejandro's end. One thing to note is that the Umbreon, of course, as we saw, has Yawn, right? So Yawn is actually really critical against either of these because if you're able to Yawn something as it Dynamaxes on the first turn, that can be huge because then it basically shuts it down for the remainder of the game. So yeah, it looks like Rafael here considering for the Yawn onto Landorus is going to target that Landorus, and so whoever Dynamaxes here is going to be a really big deal, right? Alejandro, if it chooses to Dynamax the Rotom and you put on a lot of damage onto Umbreon, then you can't put the Rotom to sleep for the remainder of the game, and that's a really big deal. So let's see if Alejandro is able to play this turn correctly and avoid the Yawn onto the, or at least avoid getting put to sleep onto the Dynamax Pokemon. So let's see who maxes here.
All right, Alejandro is going to opt for that max target, and it is going to be the Rotom here. Rotom is saved from that Yawn, and as you said, there is the Light Screen up, but this Rotom at a +3 special attack is going to be a little dangerous as well. Since we saw the Umbreon not opting for the Snarl, it means it gets to actually keep its special attack going this time around. Snarl opting to just set up that Reflect, get both of the screens up. We're actually going to see that U-turn coming out from that Landorus to swap into Alejandro's last Pokemon in the back here, giving us a little peek of the last Pokemon.
Yeah, it's a great reflect on Rafael's end, and now my question is, can the Rotom pick up a one-hit KO onto either of these Pokemon? You know, it is have increased multiple stages of increased special attack, but of course that light screen is up. So let's see. Looks like it's gonna opt for that Max Flare. Is gonna target down that Umbreon. Is Umbreon able to survive? It does.
Umbreon just holding on, not going anywhere this time around, and will get that yawn on the Calyrex here. I mean, Umbreon's such a bulky Pokemon and is so difficult to take down, even with the boost on this Rotom here.
Yeah, I mean, critical survival, but at the same time, the yawn, you know, ends up being negated here. Alejandro can easily just switch Calyrex out into Landorus to negate it and get rid of it. You can also actually, interestingly enough, go for like Max Lightning. That actually sets up the electric terrain, but yeah, I'd rather just switch out here. You want to conserve that Calyrex in the late game if you're Alejandro, so that makes a lot of sense. And this Umbreon doesn't have Protect, right? So Alejandro can just safely launch another attack into it. And Grimmsnarl's in a really awkward spot right now where it basically just can't do anything at this point. It's already set up the screens. Use Spirit Break at best to just lower special attack a little bit, but for Alejandro, like, it's effectively a 2v1 right now where you can actually ignore the Grimmsnarl and you actually don't want to pick up 2 knockouts, and yeah, Umbreon just faints there. Doesn't have something like Protect to stall out a turn of Dynamax, and that means Rotom gets another turn of Max to work with here, and that's actually a really, really big deal because Rafael's team is really weak to Rotom in general, and a +2 Max move, especially with the Sun Up, will do a lot of damage, and so you got Charizard and Groudon in the back here. I mean, you like both are pretty weak to Rotom, especially because the sun is up and Rotom is at +2. So for Rafael to pull off a comeback right now, you basically want to stall out this last turn of Dynamax and then try to basically have your Max try to sweep through in this end game. The Calyrex Shadow Rider on Alejandro's end is also going to still put on a lot of offensive pressure, especially with Astral Barrages or Expanding Forces. So Rafael, if you're actually opting to go for the Groudon first, that definitely makes sense. Now the question is, what do you do with Groudon? You just go for that safe Protect. It feels like the safest option, but you could go for a Dynamax as he's opting to go for right now. And yeah, I think like Protect or Dynamax both work here. But I don't know, Protect feels decently safe here to me. You just might be a little bit worried about eating up too much damage from a Max Flare through the Protect.
Yeah, it's especially with that Sun Up through Protect, the Groudon would certainly take a nice little chunk of damage here. Though it would have been nice if it went for the Protect and another Spirit Break to try and lower the Rotom's special attack down even further, but instead, just wanting to get rid of this Rotom all together here, and is going to get to hit that Rock Fall first into this Rotom.
Oh,
not enough. So at least it will get to set up the stand and not let the Rotom be dealing as much with this Max Flare, but definitely a KO that Rafael was wanting to pick up. It's going to hit that U-turn off of the Grimmsnarl here to bring this Calyrex back out onto the field, and this Calyrex, I feel, might be a little bit of an issue. This is such a scary restricted to be playing against late game.
Yeah, and such a critical survival there on the Rotom. I mean, that's really feels like the trend that we've seen really throughout the first couple of games today, Sierra. Just clutch survivals on all of these Pokemon. So, you know, Rafael does end up maxing that Groudon, and this Groudon, you know, not in a terrible spot right now. You've stalled out Alejandro's Dynamax. You still have two turns of Dynamax to work with, and Groudon, you know, takes a fair amount of damage here, but still at a relatively healthy amount. Now, Spirit Break actually ends up going into that Calyrex switching here, so it doesn't end up targeting that Rotom. So Groudon here, you know, probably feels safe to just go for another Max Rockfall onto the Rotom. And as we saw, the Groudon actually outsped both Landorus and Rotom, so that's actually really critical as well. Calyrex certainly can't pick up a KO onto either of these Pokemon right now, so from Rafael's end, I think you just want to make sure that that Rotom doesn't get another attack off, and yeah, just going for the safe Spirit Break and the Max Rockfall here. So let's see if Alejandro actually has a way to deal with this, because if you're not able to actually get a burst of damage onto the Groudon this turn, Groudon actually definitely can pull off this comeback just because it stalled out Alejandro's Dynamax so well.
All right. Yeah, that's something to be said about staggering the Dynamaxes and stuff and getting that late game Dynamax with that late game pressure.
That's Mud Shot to lower the speed.
We were just talking about how important it was that this Groudon was outspeeding, but that Mud Shot lowering the speed, allowing the Rotom to get a nice hit into this Groudon before going down here. A little gift to remember it by. That was a little sneaky, and that Rotom dealt a big chunk of damage to that Groudon here.
Yeah, and that, I think, is a game-winning play, honestly, from Alejandro's end. Now, granted, Rafael still has some room to work with, but the Spirit Break's not doing very much damage, and that's just been the awkward thing about Grimmsnarl in this whole game, right? It's out on the field, it's able to lower the special attack a little bit, you've gotten the screens up. What do you do afterwards? Alejandro, after that NDD went down, has always had 2 Pokemon in the field that can put on a lot of pressure. Now, Rafael actually, I believe, has that Thunder Wave on the Grimmsnarl. So one way Rafael could have gotten around the Mudshot play is you just Thunder Wave to lower Calyrex's speed immediately. Now, maybe Rafael didn't go for that because the Groudon just actually doesn't have any speed investment, so Calyrex, even at -2 speed, maybe still outspeeds the Groudon. But if it doesn't, then... oh, actually, I believe the Psychic Trait is still up, right? So that's probably why you didn't go for that. Yeah, so I guess, yeah, that wasn't an option, but he could have max guarded the Groudon maybe to get around it. Now Groudon in a really tough spot because all Groudon needed to do was survive. And, you know, with a healthy amount of HP, and it's definitely not at a healthy amount of HP right now.
We see that Groudon is going to swap out, holding on to the little HP it has and swapping into that Charizard here to... But the Astral Barrage coming out from this Calyrex. I mean, it has had a couple Spirit Breaks hit into it, so the special attack isn't that fantastic, but a nice little chunk of damage on both of these Pokemon, and this Landorus will get to connect a Rock Slide onto both of them as well, picking up that KO on this Charizard here.
Yeah, Thunder Wave miss onto that Calyrex, but at this point I think Landorus should just win the end game for Alejandro. I mean, this was really, really close, and that Mudshot into Overheat play was just so nice. Critically, those attacks were able to actually connect. If you miss Overheat there, it really does feel like a disaster. So just able to actually get that chunk of damage on the Groudon. Rafael, you know, now ending up switching out Groudon last turn. It didn't really feel like he had a great path to victory, but I was thinking one way you could have approached this is you just sacrifice the Groudon, actually, so you get a free switch and into that Charizard. Then you can Thunder Wave Calyrex, hope for a Heat Wave, or hope for a Rock Slide miss on the Landorus. And so I think sacrificing Charizard just means there's really no way out of it at this point, because the Landorus can just cleanly sweep through an Earthquake at this point.
Yeah, the Calyrex opting to just go for the Protect here. Groudon, of course, is going to go for an attack and is going to connect it onto the Landorus as well, but not dealing any amount of damage. And Spirit Wave, of course, just going into the Calyrex. Oh, it's going to be Earthquake coming out from this Landorus and will pick up this KO on the Groudon. And this Grimmsnarl is going to be left all alone out on the field, and this one's going to be Alejandro set to start off this best of 3 here.
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely a really wild battle. Once again, clutch survivals with that Entity, with that Rotom Heat, both Pokemon surviving with just a little bit of HP, and then Alejandro going for that double up onto the Groudon. But, you know, Rafael definitely had a game plan going into this. The idea was to make sure Rotom Heat doesn't just go unchecked, because if you mislead against Rotom Heat and the Entity, it can really just sweep you right from the start. So, yeah, that was definitely a very fun and exciting game to watch from both ends, and I think one thing that was also really critical in this game was that the Yawn didn't go into that Rotom Heat. It went into the Landorus instead, and I think most likely reading into Landorus maxing that turn. Instead, it was Rotom Heat that ended up maxing, and it managed to get so much mileage out of its 3 turns of max. And so, you know, I think the adjustment in Game 2, I could definitely see the same Pokemon coming out. Now, Charizard wasn't really used at all, so you maybe could switch that up, but I think the Grimmsnarl, Umbreon, Groudon core definitely should be what you play towards. You kind of just need to protect Groudon a little bit better, because in that last game, it just ended up taking so much damage from that Rotom Heat in the 2 turns, and you know, if you were able to actually knock out the Rotom Heat, there wasn't late game damage into that Groudon, but because of that Mudshot speed drop immediately getting lowering Groudon speed, yeah, Rotom just able to burst it away for 2 big attacks.
Is there any lead adjustment that you think, especially with the Indeedee and the Rotom on the other side of the field, that can be made this time around, or Grimmsnarl Umbreon still the best thing to be trying to counter that Nasty Plot helping hand here? I mean, follow me here, sorry.
No, I think that's a really good question. And honestly, I mean, I like the Grimmsnarl and Umbreon lead. It's just how you play after the first 3 turns that I think maybe needs to be adjusted a little bit. Whether it be a Yawn, and you know, you can't fault the Yawn into the Landorus slot because Landorus maxing there definitely seemed like a possibility. So it's not like it was just like a misplay, right? It was just a prediction that didn't go the right way. But I honestly still like Grimmsnarl and Umbreon. Part of me wonders maybe you end up switching out that Grimmsnarl instead of just leaving it on the field the entire game, because Grimmsnarl literally lasted on the field that entire battle. And while it's great to set up screens, it just doesn't put on that much pressure after, right? Which allowed the double ups into the Groudon slot consistently, because you can just leave Grimmsnarl unchecked. So maybe switching out Grimmsnarl in the first couple of turns after you getting up screens is definitely an option. Venusaur always works, but I don't think Venusaur is very good into this matchup, especially into Indeedee, Calyrex, and Rotom Heat, so I just don't expect to see that at all. And the last one's Regieleki, but that doesn't feel like it does very much in a Rotom Heat and Landorus as well. So I feel like the Pokemon choice is fine, just needs to make some different plays.
All right, that being said, let's see what different plays are being made, and let's get into this second match here. Right, so we will see that Indeedee and that Rotom, of course, again to start with the Grimmsnarl Umbreon as well. So same leads on both sides here. So imagine a bit of a similar start to the first game here.
Yeah, and I can't imagine the first couple turns are going to play out that differently. Like, I think, you know, it's very safe. You never want to light screen immediately unless you think Rotom Heat's actually going to do damage to you, but doesn't really pose much of a threat, right? Thunder Wave can't work against either of these Pokemon right now. Yeah, you don't need to Reflect either, so naturally the only attack Grimmsnarl can go for is that Spirit Break. Snarl makes a lot of sense here as well. It is, like, one thing I was thinking is, what if you just go for a Yawn immediately on turn 1 and then force the Indeedee to switch out, then you can Yawn into Rotom the next turn. But then, of course, Indeedee could cover with that with the Follow Me. So, yeah, classic Follow Me, nasty plot to start of the game from Alejandro. I think very little reason to not go for that play.
If it worked the first time, why not go for it again? The Umbreon just going for that Snarl yet again to prevent the Rotom from setting up much more than it already can. And this Grimmsnarl just with that Spirit Break. So, I mean, exact same turn as the first game here.
Yeah, and you know, even though Rafael lost that last game, I think that it makes a lot of sense to just go for the same play, because Rafael's early game wasn't that bad that last game. Sure, Rotom Heat got set up, but at the end of the day, you saw that with that light screen and Rotom set up, actually wasn't doing that much damage anyway. Now, granted, the Groudon did faint to a Max Flare Overheat combo. Well, it took a lot of damage from that, didn't actually faint, but yeah, either way, it makes sense that Rafael's willing to kind of play this early game out the same way. Alejandro, once again, just going for the setup, which makes so much sense, though, because Rotom is just the clear Dynamax candidate in this matchup. You really want to allow it to just set up as quickly as possible. You know, Rafael slowly chipping away at it, and this time around, I'm curious if the Indeedee will survive again.
Yeah, you never quite know with the rolls here, and it looks like it will.
No
that
way.
1 HP. Yet again, this Indeedee is not going anywhere. It was curious to see if it was just a little lucky the first time around, or I don't know, but this Indeedee is definitely being a bit of a problem here for Rafael, getting that third turn of Follow Me Up.
Yeah, surely it can't keep getting away with it, right? But it does. That's 2 times in a row where it survives with what looks like exactly 1 HP. So, yeah, I mean, this early game is playing out very similarly to that last game. Now, this time around, the Grimmsnarl actually opting to try to get the screens up immediately. And, ooh, that's actually going to be a dodge, which makes this a little interesting because it does chip away a little bit more of the Rotom. And, yeah, just as I say, Indeedee can't keep getting away with it, it gets away with it. It sticks on the field for yet another turn.
Indeedee just out there to prove you wrong, it seems. Thought it was problematic being on the field for 3 turns. What about a 4th turn? Especially as we said that this was playing out exactly like the first game as well. This was definitely a little shakeup that Rafael doesn't really want to see here.
I think one thing to note is that last time, the Rotom hung on with just a sliver of HP from the Max Rockfall, right? So if the Umbreon gets another Snarl off and say Rotom doesn't Dynamax here, maybe you actually put the Rotom in KO range from a Max Rockfall later on. So yeah, Indeedee just goes for yet another Follow Me, sticking around for a little bit longer, but I think that's maybe the upside for Rafael. Yes, this Rotom is getting dangerously scary with all these boosts, but if you're able to actually chip away at it enough, then maybe the Groudon can just actually pick up a KO even onto a max Rotom with a max Rockfall. That's a really big deal. So from Alejandro's end, it's actually going to be really important to try to conserve that Landorus maybe for an Intimidate onto the Groudon that we know is going to be waiting in the back end. Honestly, I think Rafael probably comes out of this early game a little bit better, especially because that Rotom here actually does not have the Citrus Berry, and so it can't heal up. Now it looks like it's in range from a max Rockfall from that Groudon, and what's awkward for Alejandro is he feels forced to bring out that Landorus, but that means you don't get that Intimidated off into that Groudon. So while this Rotom has been boosted up, one thing that makes this really tricky for Alejandro is that the Groudon actually outspeeds both Rotom and the Landorus, and so now maybe Landorus wants to consider Dynamaxing, going for something like a max Airstream. That'll allow the Rotom to outspeed Groudon later on. But then the question is, can a max Airstream and a Thunderbolt even pick up a KO onto something like Umbreon? You really don't want to get hit by something like a Yawn right now if you're Alejandro. So yeah, I think like Landorus actually feels like the more likely Dynamax candidate given how this early game is played out. But let's see.
There's Alejandro, of course, going for that max. And it is going to be that Landorus. The Rotom, yeah, the Rotom being super chipped down this time around. Super scary with its special attack, but not with its HP. That is for sure here. And Grimmsnarl just looking to set up the Reflect here, not wanting to take as much damage from this Landorus, which will get the opportunity to hit a max Airstream out into this Umbreon, only picking up about a third of damage. I mean, Umbreon's a bulky little one, definitely is not the easiest to be taken down, and the longer it's around on the field, just the more problematic it is. Though there is going to be the overheat into it, and still holding on at that 23 HP, getting the opportunity to eat its berry and start building it back up. That was, man, Umbreon's not going anywhere here and is going to hit that Yawn into the Landorus. The first game, the Landorus swapped out and didn't get to fall asleep, but this time it is Max and is having to make a choice here.
Yeah, much better first couple of turns for Rafael this time around, and I think that's one reason why he was content going with the same lead. I think he realized, hey, I just, I made a slight mistake in letting the Rotom go out of control and get two big attacks off into Groudon that last game. So Rafael in a fantastic position right now. I mean, if this Landorus doesn't have a Lumberry, it is actually so difficult for Alejandro, right? Because then the late game Groudon just looks so strong. So Landorus is going to just decide to stay in here and actually goes for that max Flutterby instead. So coming off from that U-turn is going to be enough to actually pick up that KO. Special attack drop onto Grimmsnarl wasn't a very big deal, but yeah, my main question here is basically, will the Landorus have Lumberry? Because if not, it's effectively going to be a 2v1 for one or even two turns of this game.
Oh, certainly. This Rotom, after that special attack drop it took from its overheat, just going for another nasty plot here, and the Grimmsnarl just opting to Spirit Break to start lowering its special attack down. Once again, as this Landorus is just going to start taking a snooze and is going to sleep off the last turn of Dynamax here. And we finally do get to see from Rafael's end that he did bring the Charizard again this time around, and is even debating bringing it in at this point.
Yeah, what's interesting is that Rotom can actually do a lot of damage to both Charizard and the Groudon right now, right? You are at multiple increased stages of special attack, so honestly, my main question in this endgame is, can Charizard survive? And Rotom's actually only a +2 special attack, so for that reason, I think you're probably fine here with Rafael to just max. Sure, +2 Thunderbolt's gonna hurt, but with Light Screen being up, Charizard should definitely survive. And so as long as you don't get crit or paralyzed by the Thunderbolt, I think it's pretty safe here to just max the Charizard. You can go for a max Rockfall into that Rotom. You can also max Airstream here if you're nervous about Landorus like waking up really quickly. I like the decision to switch into Groudon here. This is what happened last time, or what didn't happen in that last game, where the Groudon the Grimmsnarl just stayed on the field for way too long. So I actually really love this play by Rafael. Targeting the Landorus with max Airstream, you get the Solar Power, and so you get the Sun Up for Solar Power, you do more damage there. And then with that speed boost, you'll definitely outspeed with Charizard and Groudon in this end game. Landorus' Dynamax is also going to end after this next turn. So I think this is a really good play from Rafael, and as long as you don't get crit by a Thunderbolt or parried by a Thunderbolt right now, it puts you in a very commanding position to take the second game.
All right, don't call the hacks or the hacks are going to happen. Every time we spoke in this match about something happening we don't want to see. I don't want to put that onto these players here. This Charizard, though, is going to go for the max here. And I mean, the pressure that Rafael gets to put out now is super, super nice after the slow start, but the Rotom is just going to go for a protect here, not wanting to take any damage. The Landorus, of course, going to be taking that first turn of sleep as this Airstream comes out. Does a nice little chunk of damage and is starting to get some speed control on Rafael's end, which, as you said, if you start getting the speed, you can start cleaning up a potential endgame situation.
Exactly, and yeah, I think the protect on Alejandro's end makes a lot of sense. You hope that Rafael maybe misplays. Like, for example, if Rafael goes for like a max move into the Rotom there, Rotom survives, and then you don't get that speed boost, then Landorus and Rotom can actually outspeed both Pokemon the next turn and actually maybe pick up some knockouts. So I think Alejandro probably recognizes, hey, I'm already pretty behind in this game. At this point, I need to hope for Rafael to misplay rather than like the game like doesn't really feel like it's in his control, for example. So for that reason, I think, you know, you're basically fishing for the potential misplays from Rafael's end. Rafael, however, does not make the mistake of going for an attack into that Rotom, correctly max Airstream into Landorus, and now you have a Charizard and Groudon. All of these Pokemon on the field have a speed boost right now, but we already know this Groudon and Charizard are faster, and so I think this really should just seal up the game at this point for Rafael.
A big GMAC Wildfire coming out from this Charizard here and is going to take down that Landorus. And Groudon, of course, with that Rock Slide onto the Rotom, cleans that up as well. So Rafael in a fantastic position here as Alejandro is left with one Pokemon left in the back. Surely that Calyrex, but against 3 Pokemon left on Rafael's end still. Here it is.
Yeah, and late game Calyrex definitely does not want to be in this position, right? Can't really do any damage. I mean, Charizard's just going to clean it up with the Wildfire at this point. So even though we saw the exact same Pokemon as the last game, this game played out completely differently, and part of it is because Alejandro basically got a lot less out of his Dynamax. That Landorus was not lumburied either, so as a result, it just fell asleep after the yawn, and that was really, really critical. Rafael making the correct decision to yawn into Landorus again. That's a tough play to make, especially because it didn't work out the last time around. You know, in that first game, Alejandro ended up Dynamaxing that Rotom. Landorus got hit by the yawn, and the yawn was basically completely negated. So that was really, really fun, and you know, that's why I really like watching VGC sometimes. You can see players bring the exact same Pokemon, but matches can play out completely differently. And I think the decision to Dynamax Landorus definitely made sense, especially because Rotom Heat took so much damage, but in the end, it cost him a lot, especially because the yawn did correctly go out into that slot that turn. That yawn was a really big deal, because I think if Landorus doesn't get put to sleep, it can just keep boosting Rotom speed, and then Rotom can just do so much damage to the rest of the team. Also, really critical that Umbreon was actually able to survive that turn.
Do you think on that turn 4 there, the turn 3 when the Umbreon missed the Snarl on the Indeedee, that ended up working for him, that miss, more than anything, because then we saw another Follow Me come out, as well as another Nasty Plot, which let the Rotom get hit and just chip down so much to the point it wasn't really even usable as a Dynamax target. How do you think that shook things out there?
This is a really good question, and I agree. Yeah, I think it just resulted in Rotom taking significantly more chip damage, and that turn you ended up getting hit by special attack drops anyway, right? So it's not like Rotom was gaining that much, and put it in a range where it looked like Max Rockfall without an Intimidate maybe could KO. Part of the other tricky thing is, like, the Landorus came out immediately, and, you know, it makes sense. You really don't want to bring out Calyrex Shadow Rider into an Umbreon, but because Landorus came out immediately, it meant that you're kind of forced to Dynamax the Landorus over Rotom, because if you Dynamax the Rotom and then Landorus, like, doesn't get an Intimidate on Groudon's Max Rockfall will probably just knock out that Rotom. And so this goes to show, often I think when people play Pokemon, they think, oh, I just need to go for a knockout when I can, but often it actually can be beneficial when you don't pick up a KO intentionally. Now, in that game, you know, obviously the goal was to knock out Indeedee, but that Snarl miss did end up being beneficial. It's kind of like that first game, though, on the opposite end, where Grimmsnarl stayed on the field, and that actually can help you because it just doesn't apply offensive pressure. And so sometimes having something that's passive, has to be worth it. And in the end, it didn't. The Indeedee, like that extra Nasty Plot on the last turn, didn't actually end up being a big enough deal, especially because Rotom did end up Dynamaxing.
All right, yeah, that's. I mean, I love that. Just like goes to show that, like you said, the typical taking a KO not actually being beneficial. But let's head into this game 3 here to see what adjustments these players make, especially since both of the first 2 games, the first 3 turns were so similar. And I am assuming this time they're going to be similar yet again. The only thing switching is where the Pokemon are out on the field. But I'm excited to see, after the first 3 turns, what adjustments are made for both of these players.
Yeah, I also wonder, like, is there any way you could play this early game any differently from either sides? But it just feels like you're kind of going through the formalities. And like, one thing to note that's interesting here is the lack of follow me from Indeedee.
Yeah, the Indeedee opted instead for that mystical fire out on that Umbreon. Just getting that special attack drop, that's definitely a very different play here. The Snarl, Rafael keeping it the same with that Snarl and that Spirit Break. What are you thinking about that lack of follow me? Do you think that's going to be more beneficial here, or?
That's a really interesting turn 1. Rafael makes the correct play to not Spirit Break into Indeedee, saying, hey, I'm going to force you to go for follow me. If you don't, then I'm going to bring Rotom down to neutral. The Mystical Fire makes sense in theory, right? Part of what made the last couple of games tough is with the Umbreon just hanging on so much, and so hanging on with just a sliver of HP. So any bit of chip damage definitely goes a long way onto it, especially because it doesn't have leftovers, right? So it's not just healing back at the end of the turn. So, you know, I definitely like that play from both ends. I think both players making a correct play there in the sense that I think you could definitely, you know, get a fair amount out of it. So this time around, Alejandro going for a follow me to play a little bit safer. That will ensure Rotom will come out the turn a little bit better this time around.
Yeah, especially since those Spirit Breaks did add up into the Rotom after the Indeedee went down, which surely Alejandro does not want to see here, and is just looking to be setting up with these 2 Pokemon yet again here. I'm excited to see what's going to be happening, though, coming up after these turns, after this Indeedee goes down. But this Indeedee is just going to opt for another follow me here. Grimmsnarl is just going to take the opportunity to set up the light screen, of course. It's about that time in the match we're going to see that light screen come out as this Rotom, yet again, getting very familiar with this animation, going for another nasty plot here, just to be brought back down with this Snarl.
And, you know, even though the light screen seems relatively obvious, it is important to go for it there because you don't want to just get KO'd by some... Like, let's say Rotom actually chooses the Dynamax and Indeedee goes for a helping hand. If you don't go for a light screen, maybe you actually get KO'd on Umbreon. That would actually be a really critical deal. So, you know, it is always important to identify, hey, when do I just go for it to prevent anything, like, wild from happening, right? And I think that was just an appropriate use of that light screen immediately. We're kind of in that same early game, but the thing is, Rafael is slowly distributing damage, slowly and surely with these Snarls, right? And that does add up pretty quickly. And so I think, you know, makes sense for Umbreon to continue to Snarl here. What's interesting is with the Grimmsnarl, you know, do you just go for the knockout with Spirit Break onto the Indeedee? If not, what you could do is intentionally, you could switch out or intentionally go for any other attack like Reflect, anything that doesn't damage Indeedee. To be in that same situation as like the end of or the beginning of game 2 where you just chip away without actually giving that free switch in immediately, and that makes things a little bit more awkward for Alejandro.
Yeah, especially since the Snarl gets to hit the Rotom anyways, being a spread damage attack. I mean, despite the fact that the Indeedee's following me, the Rotom is slowly getting chipped down every single time here, but the Umbreon instead this turn actually opting to finally go into that Yawn, into that Indeedee here. And Alejandro is going to have to make a big decision here on what to do next with these 2 Pokemon.
Yeah, the Yawn at least means that Indeedee, should it follow me this turn, will fall asleep, and then we'll have to at least take 1 turn of guaranteed sleep, which then opens you up to maybe going for Yawn onto Rotom. But Rotom is at multiple stages of increased special attack at this point, so I wonder if Alejandro this time around maybe just wants to push the go button, Dynamax that Rotom, and maybe try to snipe down the Umbreon. Now, my only question is whether or not you can one-shot Umbreon from this range. It's not going to be a Dynamax yet, so Indeedee is just going to go for yet another follow me here.
Another follow me, just to let the Rotom go for yet one more nasty plot while it is still safe to do so before that Indeedee takes a snooze. Snarl yet again. I mean, Rotom's faring a lot better, like, health-wise this time around, after its 4th nasty plot, I think. Last time it was severely chipped down, whereas this time it still actually has a nice little chunk. The Indeedee, though, with that Lumberry, no wonder Alejandro was not concerned about it. Indeedee waking up, no nap today. I was not expecting that one.
Yeah, and Rafael went for Thunder Wave onto Indeedee, so I wonder if he just forgot about the Psychic Terrain, because I think, you know, maybe you're hoping to get rid of the Lumberry so then the Indeedee falls asleep. Otherwise, maybe the Thunder Wave was just so that you intentionally don't actually pick up a KO onto Indeedee to deny a free switch in for Alejandro's end. I mean, but like you mentioned, Sierra, the Rotom is a little bit healthier this time around, and it has more increased stages of special attack, so that Lumberry is actually so clutch. You know, I was wondering if there was a Lumberry on the team, because it wasn't on Landers, which sometimes likes to carry it, and now you're in a really weird spot where you can't get a safe yawn onto Rotom at any point. Rotom just still able to boost up, still so healthy, and might actually end up getting to, you know, +5, +6 special attack. It's another Thunder Wave coming out, it looks like, from the Grimmsnarl, and it's just going to be a Thunderbolt finally coming out, so not maxing yet, but that makes sense. You know, you don't want to necessarily max if you don't think you can ensure a one-hit KO, and I mean, this time around, Rafael is and it's another yawn. Okay, so I've been trying to punish the Rotom, but you don't land it into the Rotom slot, and now the Rotom can finally max and maybe just target the Umbreon slot for damage, and so it's definitely been a slow start to this game, but I think Alejandro's position is a lot better than the second game, because the Rotom hasn't taken as much damage and has more increased stages of special attack than last time around.
Yeah, considering that there's been like the same 4 Pokemon starting each game, they've all played out so differently past the first couple of turns, and this one even just from turn 1 playing out so differently, and it's so interesting how it's shaken up here. I'm really intrigued to see what this Rotom is going to go for here, because like you said, this Rotom actually has managed to get his special attack up pretty high and still has the HP to match. But we will see that Grimmsnarl not wanting to stick around on the field too much longer and swapping out into this Groudon here to start putting up a little more pressure. The Indeedee just going for this helping hand. This Rotom's going to hit a big Thunderbolt into this Umbreon. Doesn't need to max to take out those KOs, and is just taking this Umbreon out of there before the Indeedee goes to bed.
Yeah, that's a big knockout to pick up though, right? Umbreon has been such a strong option for Rafael for disruption in this game. I think what's tricky this time around, though, is that Alejandro, of course, does have that Landorus in the back, and Landorus is so good into a Groudon and a Charizard in this position, because this means if you switch in Landorus, I don't think Max Rockfall is going to knock out Rotom. So then my question is, can you even double up onto Rotom for a KO? Could be interesting is, yeah, Dynamaxing Charizard may be a little bit better of an option, but it's so risky because if you end up maxing and Rotom just ends up going for a, Max Lightning onto Charizard, you basically only get 1 turn of max off for 1 attack here. So, one way I could also see Rafael winning this game is, I think that is Swords Dance, and yeah, so he's going for that Max Airstream and that Swords Dance, which I think can be a very, very huge play here. But if Alejandro just, ends up maxing the Rotom this turn and gets a lot of damage off, Rotom at this point should be able to one-shot either of these Pokemon, despite the Snarls and the Light Screen throughout the course of this game. So now in a prime position to actually Dynamax that Rotom Heat. In that last game, Landorus T didn't do very much as a max option, but this time around, I think, yeah, it's very good just even as a non-max option, especially for that Intimidate, and Rotom maxing this turn can potentially just pick up a one-hit KO onto either of these Pokemon. So let's see if the Rotom actually decides to protect here, because if it protects, Rafael can actually get so much off this Max Airstream and Swords Dance, but if it doesn't protect, Rafael might just lose a Pokemon and fall, too far behind in this match.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, especially with the Protect. Like, you never want to Protect into allowing your opponent to get a free setup here. That'd just be absolutely devastating. But see here, instead opting to go for the Max, no Protects here. This Rotom is absolutely terrifying, despite the Light Screen and all the Snarls. I mean, it managed to get so much setup going for it. It'll be interesting to see where it's going to be targeting for this turn.
Yeah, and I was thinking, if you're Rafael, one thing that Rafael could have gone for is a double up onto the Rotom, because there is, I believe, that Ancient Power. That's so much damage from Max Airstream. Not enough to actually pick up a KO, but it is a critical hit there. Landorus, however, critically still actually surviving the turn. And we know Groudon's not going for a Rock Slide, so we'll be able to cycle back out and in for potential future Intimidates. Now, Groudon does get that Swords Dance off, but Alejandro making the decision to max the Rotom. Rafael does not target it, and there's a Max Lightning. I think this might just one-hit KO the Charizard.
And it does. 1 turn of Max, and this Charizard is out of there. Though it did get a nice little speed boost for the Groudon, as well as almost picking up a KO, but you never want to lose your max after one turn of damage here. But that is what's happening on Rafael's end, is he is left with a Groudon and a Grimmsnarl against an absolutely terrifying Rotom here.
Yeah, and Groudon is good. It's gotten the Swords Dance off, but that Landorus brings it down to just +1 attack. Grimmsnarl cannot do any damage other than going for a Spirit Break. It's so slow. And so I think your only hope of winning right now from Rafael's end is basically hoping for a Rock Slide critical hit onto the Rotom, I feel like. Now, one play you could make this turn, I guess, is, I don't know, protect Groudon, Spirit Break into Rotom, but Rotom's at so many increased stages of special attack where I feel like that doesn't really get you anywhere. So I feel like the best hope here is to hope for, yeah, Rock Slide crit. Looks like Rafael recognizes that and is just going to go for it. If you don't crit the Rotom this turn from Rafael's end, I think Alejandro will just win the game. I like the Landorus switch out here from Alejandro's end just to reset for another Intimidate, because at this point, Rafael's endgame attackers are all physical attackers. So that last turn was so critical, and Rafael, you know, goes for a strong play, but Alejandro reads into it, doesn't protect the Rotom, and ends up getting so much damage. And here's the Rock Slide. It's not enough.
No crit, unfortunately. All that critical hit luck was used up on the last turn, and it deals a little chunk of damage, but this Rotom is going to do surely more than a chunk, as it just picks up that clean one-hit KO on this Groudon here. And with one Grimmsnarl against the Worlds here, Alejandro's got this end game here. This poor Grimmsnarl is left all by itself in game 1, and we're left with it all by itself here in game 3.
Yeah, and the name of this game was Alejandro just protecting the Rotom Heat a little bit better. I think the main thing was Rafael just mixing it up a little bit in going for those yawns. And I really like the yawn option, but because Indy actually had that Lumberry, that's a really big game changer, especially because the Psychic Terrain prevented Thunder Wave from actually getting rid of that Lumberry. And so, you know, this is an open team sheet tournament. Rafael must have known that Alejandro actually had the Lumberry onto the Indy, but I like the decision to go for yawn because it does punish if Indy ends up not going for a Follow Me. However, Indy, of course, did go for Follow Me in all the correct times. A little bit risky to go for that, you know, Mystical Fire on turn 1, but because